Hi guys, so you just finished your build an atom simulation and you were trying to figure out what makes an ion, what subatomic particle must you manipulate to get an ion. And before we get into that, and before we take a little bit of guided notes, which I know is not the most fun thing, but I think that's the best kind of way to learn this, I want to start with this big question. What are your life goals? So what do you foresee yourself doing in the future? What do you think is going to make you happy? As you kind of think about that, like I imagine when I was in middle school, my life goal was, I think I wanted to be a teacher at that point. I also wanted to have a big family. I wanted to have dogs and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like in general, I've kind of met my life goal. Yeah, I probably wanted to be wealthy at one point, and I probably wanted to have a ton of clothes and shoes, and maybe I haven't met that. But for the most part, I feel like I've been pretty successful in kind of judging that. So why I ask you that seems super weird and off topic, is because, excuse me, atoms have life goals too. But atoms' life goals are not complex like ours. They are very, very simple. And atoms' life goal is actually just to have a full outer shell. So when we talk about atoms and Bohr models, we know that the electrons fill the shells. And that's what happens is they fill shells, but then sometimes, for the most part, a lot of them don't have a full outer shell. Their inner shells might be full, but their outer shell is not. And that's what they strive to have. So nothing else. They just want to have a full outer shell. Now, going back to that, that's what makes an ion, is when your electrons are manipulated, nothing else. So when I change my electrons, I now have an ion. So in order to fulfill their goal of that full outer shell, they have to lose or gain electrons. So when you lose electrons, and this is where I would take these notes, losing electrons become positive. These are positive ions, and they're cations. Now, a couple of ways to remember this, because this is new vocabulary for you. Cations have a T in it, and I highlighted that T, and the T looks very similar to a plus sign. Well, that should help you with cations are positive. Now, my personal favorite, and a little corny and cheesy, however, it works, is cations are positive, and cats have paws, a way to remember that. So there we go. You're welcome. The next thing is gaining electrons. So when we gain electrons, this kind of seems weird. We actually become negative ions. So typically when you gain things, you become positive. That's not the case here. And a way to remember that is there's an N in anions, and that'll help us. Okay, so now I'll go into a little bit of it, why this happens, because it's a little weird about gaining and being negative and all that stuff. So here's my real life example to make it as clear as day for you, hopefully. You have a group of friends. Within your group of friends, I'm sure you can attest to this, there are some really positive people that every day they're really happy. It could be pouring outside and they still think it's great. Okay, those are your protons right here. Now, in your same group of friends, you have the Eeyores, the woe is me people. Life is terrible. I can't believe this. Oh my gosh, it's sunny out, all that kind of stuff. Those are your electrons. Now, typically in your group, you have about equal amount of protons as you do electrons to kind of make your overall charge of your group neutral. And that's what we have here. We have a neutral group. But what happens is, we talked about we gain or lose these electrons. So let's first look at if I gain electrons or I gain negativity. Well, if I gain negativity in my group, my overall charge of my group now becomes negative. So that's what happens with when I gain electrons. When I gain electrons, we have anions, and anions are negative ions. So it seems weird that when you gain something, you become negative, but remember, you're gaining negativity. Now, the next thing is we have a neutral group, but this time we're going to get rid of an electron. So at this point, I have 3 positive people in my group, but I only have 2 negative. So my overall group is now positive, and this is what cations are. So when you lose negativity or you lose electrons, you become cations and you become positive. All right, so hopefully that makes a little bit more sense, but now let's go into how to make these. So the best way right now for your skill set is to go from the neutral atom of a Bohr bottle of a neutral atom and then transfer that idea into what an ion is. So let's start with fluorine. I'm going to go through the neutral atom Bohr models pretty fast because we already know how to do this skill. So if I have a neutral atom of fluorine, I have 9 protons, 10 neutrons, and also 9 electrons to neutralize my 9 protons, 9 and 9. So when I look at this atom has not met its life goal. It has not met it because it only has 7 in its outer shell and it's not full. So we have to figure out, are we going to gain electrons or are we going to lose electrons? Well, if we gain electrons, I would only need to gain 1 right here. If I lose electrons, this shell is full, so I'd actually have to lose all 7 of these to go back to the inner shell, which is full. So think about rounding, think about math class. Gaining 1 electron or losing 7. Which one makes more sense? Hopefully in your mind you said gaining 1, and that's what we do, is actually when I draw my ion, everything stays the same except I now add that electron that I gained here. So we now have met our life goal of fulfilling that full outer shell by this electron that I added. So the last thing that we do in order to finish my ion is we have to write my ionic symbol and give what the type of ion it is. So ionic symbol is pretty easy. All it is my symbol for my element and then my overall charge of my ion. Well, since I have 9 protons, which is a +9, but now I have 10 electrons because I added another electron, I actually have a -1 charge. Okay, so because of that, I put a -1 here, or because it's just a 1, you can put a negative sign. If it was bigger than 1, I would definitely need the number. Now, the other thing here is identifying the type. This is an anion because it is negative, okay? So let's go on to another example. All right, here's what I want for you to do. I want you to pause the video, and I want you to make the neutral atom of boron, and then see if you can go and create the ion of boron. Again, the goal is to have a full outer shell, all right? Once you get there, then we'll go over it. After that, then we'll try to do the next step of your ionic symbol and your type. Okay, so pause it at this moment. All right, so if we have a neutral atom of boron, I have 5 protons, 6 neutrons, and 5 electrons. Okay, so haven't met its life goal. So therefore, what I have to look at is, okay, am I going to add 5 to get to 8 in my outer shell, or am I going to take away 3? Add 5, take away 3. Well, 3 is an easier number to get rid of than adding 5. So that's what I'm going to do. So what I will do here is I simply am just going to take away those 3. So I'm going to redraw this over here. This is what the ion of boron looks like. Okay, this is my full shell because I took away those 3, and I'm left with 5 protons and 6 neutrons, and then 2 electrons now. So based on this picture, see if you can draw, or see if you can write the ionic symbol, and then also give me the type. So pause it at this moment. All right, let's see how you did. Okay, your ionic symbol should have been B3 plus or +3. The reason why I have 5 protons, which is +5, 2 electrons, which is -2, and the difference there is +3. Because it's positive, it's a cation. All right, let's try one more example together. Carbon. All right, so at this point, pause it, draw your neutral atom, and then see if you can draw the ion of carbon. All right, the neutral atom of carbon, you have 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and then 6 electrons. So at this point, I'm going to, because it has 4 in its outer shell, it's definitely not full, so I'm actually going to take those 4 away. So the first ion of carbon is actually 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and I have 2 electrons. Okay, so if that's the case, my ionic symbol is C, 4 plus or +4, because I have 6 protons and 2 electrons. And then this would be a cation. Now, some of you might be scratching your head like, well, there's 4 in the outer shell. Could we do both? The answer is yes, you actually can. And atoms like carbon and in the carbon family, that same family, actually have this property that they can go either way. And so what I can do is, because I had 4, I also can add 4. So I could take away 4 to get my first ion, or I can add 4 to get my second ion to have a full outer shell of 8. So this one has an ionic symbol of C-4 because you have 6 protons and now 10 electrons. And we call this an anion because this way I have more electrons than I do protons. Okay, so these ones are special where they can go either way, but for the most part, most of them can only go one way or the other based on how many electrons you have to add or subtract. Okay, so let's just recap really quick. First of all, when I'm creating an ion, the only thing that's manipulated is my electrons, and my electrons affect the charge. And at this point, when we talked about neutral atoms and we talked about protons equal electrons, that is not the case anymore because your protons do not equal electrons. This is why we have a charge. It's not neutral. Now, ions occur because they want to have a full outer shell. That's their life goal. So if they've met that life goal, they are now an ion, or there's something else, which is there's another special family, which some of you will figure out that rule here shortly. Atoms that gain electrons, they become negatively charged and they're anions. Atom that loses electrons are positively charged and those are called cations. So just remember the steps right now for our purposes. Draw your neutral atom, figure out how many electrons do I need to add or subtract to get that full outer shell, and then redraw your ion. Make sure you have your ionic symbol, and then also make sure you identify the type of ion. So at this point, you are ready for some practice, and then there's going to be some big questions that you guys are going to use to help identify your understanding. Use all these tools to help you, and please let me know if you have any questions. All right, good luck.